Australia! Don't stand up for cripples on a peak hour bus. I'm a punk. He's a punk.
Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be talking to you about the Grand Hotel in Sydney. The Grand Hotel was originally built in the late 1800s, and I'm interested in visiting the Grand Hotel, or the former Grand Hotel, because it was a former live music venue, albeit for about 2 years, mostly from 1977 to 1979 when it closed. And we're just coming up to George Street. I used to actually work up here in 1988 at the old Rank Xerox building. Wonder if that's still there. Probably not. So it looks like I found the location of the Grand Hotel that was located at 815 George Street, Sydney. And after talking to the workers here at Sushi Hub, which is located next to the university here, this looks like it is now 815 George Street, Sydney. Completely unrecognisable. Once upon a time it was the Grand Hotel for many years actually, until I guess it was demolished. And in 1977 the public had actually transformed the Grand and it became a punk rock venue where many bands in Sydney played. So here it is, location for the old Grand Hotel, Sydney, former live music venue, directly across from Central Station. Apparently the Funhouse, the Oxford Hotel in Darlinghurst, that closed in about 1977, and there was an Anglo-punk scene that was emerging. So there was a band called Johnny Doll and the Scabs, and Greg Morris, the drummer, him and the other members of the band, they actually approached the guy Dennis from the Grand Hotel about maybe using the room to host live music. So Dennis was actually open to the idea, and they agreed not to change the decor and only putting posters on the walls. So yeah, they pretty much kind of started to book bands, and Greg talks about lots of great bands playing there.
And so we went to the Grand and said, can we use your back room? And they said, yeah, you can have it on Friday and Saturday nights. So yeah, the Grand became a punk venue. We put ads in, I think it was Ram magazine, asking for real rock and roll bands. We didn't use the word punk.
So there was a great video called Distortions, Reflections on Early Sydney Punk, and that was made by Des Devlin, the bassist from Secret Secret. And it's a fantastic video. It is available on YouTube, you can check it out. What I wanted to do now was just sort of mention some names and some of the comments and just their thoughts about the Grand Hotel. First one I wanted to talk about was John Clements. He actually is from the band Rejects, and in his kind of views and thoughts about it all, he said, and the whole sort of punk scene, he did mention that the premise was that the establishment was corrupt and evil, and there was nothing you could do about it, so why not have fun and enjoy it? He said it was a lifestyle, a commitment, and he said that the Grand was an intense ritual, very powerful, and a lot of freedom.
And that's what made our ritual so powerful, because everybody involved totally believed in what was there, even though everyone had their own take on it. It wasn't a ritual, and the Grand Hotel was an intense ritual. But it wasn't a ritual that supported something. It was a ritual that negated everything and threw away everything. And it was so powerful, it was absolute freedom.
When I went and filmed Rejects playing in the Grand Hotel, Rejects sang a song, "Who Wants to March When You Can Riot?" And that kind of philosophy really appealed to me. I really like that.
Mark Easton from, I remember Mark Easton from the Candy Harlots, great band. He was also in a band called the Suicide Squad, and they used to play at the Grand, and I liked his comment where he mentions that it was kind of like having a uniform, because you could actually go to any city and see the sort of like-minded people that were interested in that kind of music and that kind of sort of look. People that I wanted to mention include Darian Turner, and she talks a lot about her photos in that video.
I had been taking photos a bit, but it was where I started thinking of actually taking photos of bands and stuff. And I had this big dream that I was going to become a rock photographer and all that.
Steve Heggart, Kay Glass, who has some happy snaps. Andy from Urban Gorillas talks a lot about booking the bands in the video. Joy Cornish, she's got some fantastic street photography. Astrid as well, she's got great footage of some of the bands.
There's a whole lot of Grand Hotel stuff that's just got the images. I never felt any sense of, you know, I'm documenting a significant phenomena. You know, it means that you've lost the connection with it if it becomes like, oh, this is, yeah, I'm documenting something.
Toby Zotes, who he actually filmed the band Rejects, and yeah, they were playing at the Grand. So look, the Grand did open its doors on Friday the 16th of September 1977. The band that played first there was Johnny Dole and the Scabs, supported by Tommy and the Dipsticks. They could fit about 120 people. Entry was at the front, but you could also get in through Bijo Lane apparently. There was no stage, but the guys were able to build one just from pallets and packing crates with a big piece of cardboard. And of course they had to supply their own PA and lights, and most of the time it was just a vocal PA cranked up as loud as it would go with feedback that just added to the atmosphere. So yeah, look, Toby Zotes actually first visited the Grand Hotel in 1978. He described it as being raucous, rambunctious, a great hangout for the first wave of Sydney punks. He was 28 at the time, but he said most of the crowd was between the ages of 16 and 18. And he did mention that no one gave him a hard time at the time about being queer, because he made no bones about it. And there's some fabulous footage of Toby shooting and, you know, talking to people in the crowd. It's just fantastic.
To have a camera in those days was not an easy thing to have one and to hold onto it. So it just happened that luckily that night I got a camera and I go to the Grand and Rejects were playing, and there were fun-looking punks around the hotel, and I go into the pool room and
he did actually show his Super 8 films at the front bar, and the crowd absolutely loved it. Some of the bands that played at the Grand include the Thought Criminals, Tommy and the Dipsticks, Johnny Dole and the Scabs, Chaos, Black Runner, Mental as Anything, Mangrove Boogie Kings, the Parasites, Psychosurgeons, Razor, Rejects, Rocks, Shock Treatment, Society Blitz, Suicide Squad, The All-Nighters, Broken Toys, The Clones, Crooked Hearts, The Last Word, Suppress, Urban Gorillas, Secret Secret, The Victims, and The Leftovers and Filth. Now, sadly, the Grand Hotel reign as a punk venue was short-lived. As I said, it closed in 1979. The venue closed its doors, and it was, I guess, replaced and eventually turned into this multi-storey office block. Funnily enough, I actually worked in that office block in 1988 for about 2 years. Very interesting. Look, the legacy does live on, and I think it does. The Grand Hotel does remain an important part of Sydney's live music scene. Bob Short and Steve Lorcan. Bob actually said he related to the Grand and the whole scene immediately. He said it was just joyous, and the Grand Hotel scene was one of the most fascinating to emerge in Sydney. I probably have to agree with him on that. Yeah, it was very open, and at the time involved many women in bands, including all female bands, a fair few experimental arty bands. It wasn't just punky thrash, and yeah, by mid-1978, Bob actually said it was a very healthy and vibrant scene. He also mentioned, which I think is really interesting and good, that it wasn't, while the music might have been violent and the dancing was hectic, the Grand actually was probably one of the most least dangerous venues in the history of Sydney live music venues. And Bob doesn't recall any fights, no security was ever employed there. So yeah, and interestingly enough, it was usually the suburban gigs that were violent. Stephen Borg of the band Chaos recalls a time when he and his band members had a residency at the Grand. They did actually play to an empty room until the punks got used to the volume, and he recalls that their lack of finesse actually, got them a powerful following. He said it was a different world back then. Everyone was looking for a new identity, but they didn't know what it was, and they looked up to bands like the Pistols and the Ramones and Iggy Pop. He did mention that the Grand was the only place where true punk was, and everything else was trendy bullshit. They played hard to the point of exhaustion. It was great fun. After a while, it did start to move towards other clubs such as the Sussex and Checkers. He does mention that the Grand was a boiling pot of lots of people with hardcore punks as the main and all kinds of visitors. He said that it was supercharged, a phenomena that's never been repeated in sleepy old Sydney town. I wanted to talk about the cultural part of this particular era. So obviously there was an explosion of underground, experimental and independent music during this time, and there were a lot of musicians that all kind of lived around, the Darlinghurst area in particular in Sydney. So look, it was post-Gough Whitlam, wasn't very conservative. Triple J actually had come around as Double J in 1975, and it was a bit of an anarchic type station where people like Tony Barrell, he was their DJ from 78 to 81, and they were quite open to playing some fantastic music that wasn't always the popular mainstream music of the time. Bands such as Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles, Queen, Meatloaf that had huge hits, and Sydney radio was playing a lot of that kind of music. Culturally, I guess there were some other movements happening, some other events like the big Star Wars phenomena that came around. Things like World Series cricket, scientific inventions. There was the first PC, the Commodore, and Apple's first microcomputer, as well as a lot of video gaming going on at home with the Atari and Pac-Man. So yeah, I did want to talk about that kind of cultural element, and how a lot of this sort of music was a lot of bedroom bands that would do it yourself, things that they wanted to create, and they did a lot of it in their bedroom initially, and then sort of got out there into those near empty pubs at the time who were open to getting these bands on. So obviously, it did, change. And at the time, there were other bands such as the Saints, the Birthday Party, and of course Radio Birdman, who were all kind of trying out this different style of music. So a lot of that influence did kind of permeate and surround, the people during this time at the Grand Hotel. And yeah, look, it is an interesting time and place where, as I said, not many people know about the Grand. I certainly hadn't heard of it, but I'm very curious and interested that if there are anyone, or if anyone's out there watching and you've got some stories, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hit like and subscribe so you can watch more of my videos. I will be doing a lot more. And yeah, cheers. Hope you've enjoyed it, and see you next time.
Shout, I'm a punk. I take drugs and get drunk. some hearing aids, please?
Oh, dear, yes, of course. But what you mean is you'd like to hear some hearing aids, don't you?
Now, how much are your hearing aids?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, they range in price from $1.30 at the bottom end to $2,000. Of course,
That's a big difference. How come?
Well, with the $2,000 model, you get absolutely...
What about the one for $1.30?
Here, look, I'll show you. There it is. It's basically just a button on a string.
Yeah, but that's just a button on a string, basically.